What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense, a couple of old friends who grew up together in central Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. This is our chance to get together once a week to discuss what's on our mind in the world of politics, sports, and entertainment. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. Brian Johnson is in suburban Washington, D.C. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. We got our $1 billion back in DC, so it looks like our economy is still going to be okay around this area.
Oh, you're talking about the money that was taken out of the
Right.
continuing resolution.
That
You know
seems like it
what?
would be bad. I mean,
A
I
lot of
feel
money.
like $1 billion is still a lot of money, even by
I mean,
today's standards.
I don't want to correct you, but I don't think it's officially back yet. The Senate
Ooh.
passed it, but I don't think the House has
Well,
passed
then
it.
I was misinformed by my newsman earlier.
Well, I said it's going. It looks like it's
Oh,
going to happen, but we'll talk about that continuing resolution and the whole blow up with Chuck Schumer and people
oh,
calling for, and just kind of the nature of how the Democrats have responded to Trump. We'll get to that in a minute, Brian. But first, I want to start with uh, who knows what the big news of the day is, but the news that caught my attention. So, a series of court rulings have come down in the last 48 hours that have really, by and large, gone against Trump and the administration in numerous areas. Just today, you had a federal judge rule that the ban on transgender service members in the military is stopped. It's been placed on hold by this judge going forward until they roll later on the merits. So that's not just a temporary, like expires in a day. That is, as of now, the transgender ban is no more as of now. You had probationary employees across the federal government that were fired. A judge ruled that was not done legally
mhm.
and that they all had to be reinstated. So 24,000 employees who were on probationary status have now been rehired by the federal government. A judge ruled today that Elon Musk's role in dismantling the USAID program was likely unconstitutional. And over the weekend, a judge put a hold on Trump using the 1798 Alien Act to deport illegal immigrants who are members of the
The
Venezuelan gang,
Venezuelan gang.
Tren
Yeah.
de Aragua. Now, the controversy about this ruling was that when it was issued on Saturday night, the planes carrying these alleged gang members were already in the air. The administration claimed they were already over international waters and out of U.S. airspace. So the judge said, turn the planes around,
Mhm.
but the administration did not. The planes made it to El Salvador, where these 200 and some, maybe it was 300 some migrants who are alleged gang members will be housed in this notorious prison in El Salvador, which if you've read about it, this place is
Dude,
like,
to be clear, any prison outside of the United States, not ideal.
no, this place has up to 40,000 inmates in one
I've
facility.
watched documentaries on this. I'm
That's
familiar with it.
crazy. Yeah, they're caged like it 10, 20, 30
Oh yeah.
in a cage. They have one toilet for all of them. They have beds without sheets, just
Yeah.
metal beds. And so they are going to be there for a year minimum, could be longer. And we're going to pay the government of El Salvador $6 million to house them. Now, the Trump administration borderline didn't comply with this ruling. They said they complied, but again, they did not turn the planes around. And Trump made a post on Truth Social saying the judge who made the ruling, who was an Obama appointee, should be impeached. Well, that caught the ire of the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts, who rarely makes public statements on things like this, but he did today. And his statement read in part, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. He didn't mention Trump by name, but it was clear what he's referring to. And I think this is the big fight to watch. When we talk about Trump shattering norms, doing things outside of the established protocols that could really threaten our democracy, a lot of that I think is overblown, to be quite honest. Some of it is just his rhetoric, which is over the top and outrageous. But this is the action that if he were to do this, if he were to defy blatantly court orders, that's when you would get into constitutional crisis ground. And Roberts is saying here today, look, if you don't like a ruling, you appeal. That is what you do. You complain about it, you bitch and moan about it, sure, but you don't call for impeachment. You don't flirt with defying the order. You appeal the decision.
Well, that's the key part that I am just fascinated by is, and then what happens? Because you said uncharted territory. That's where we would be. And that's why I'm interested. Because I suspect over the next almost 4 total years we have left, that at some point, it seems likely to me, he will defy an order from the court. And that's the $1 trillion question. I don't know what number we put on it, but it is then what happens. Because it's gonna happen, buddy. None of what you said is shocking, by the way. Actually, I was feeling not so great coming into this little thing that we do here. You know, I spoke to you earlier today. I fear for the end of democracy. But all these court rulings, I mean, these are the guardrails that need to hold, which is why I circle back to the first part, which is, okay, I do suspect for real that it is going to happen. And then what is the recourse, the real recourse? Because of late, I am of the strong feeling Republicans don't give a shit. They're all in on this, and this is what we're doing, man.
Yeah. Well, I think there's 3 groups of Republicans. There's a group that you mentioned that is the all in. There's another group that is not all in, but are too cowardly to say anything. That's a very large group. And then there is a small group of people like Lisa Murkowski, a few others that will
a few others, exactly.
On certain things.
Out of like 280.
But yeah,
there's
look,
like 3.
Again, if you're looking for kind of silver lining optimism, if you believe Trump is trying to push the boundaries of executive authority, which I think is pretty clear he is.
Oh, yeah.
So far, the courts are holding. Yeah. That is the silver lining. Trump's winning some cases, as he should, by the way. Not everything he's doing is crazy. And a lot of it, too, is he's doing things in a way that is inappropriate, but the end result is probably okay. Like, for instance, Trump probably does have the power to fire these employees, but you can't do it the way he did it, which they can only be fired by cause without notice. And so he said, "Hey, they sent it." Well, he didn't say. Someone sent an email that said, "You are
fired
not
performance
because you're not performing," which was ridiculous.
Just a generic blanket email. I remember that.
So the judge basically said, "No, you can't fire people." You were clearly making this up because you fired all of them and said none of them were doing a good job. You didn't even look. It was like the first days of the administration. So some of this stuff he will be able to do, but the courts are saying you have to do it the correct way. Right. So I like that. There are other things that I think he may not be able to do. And the Venezuelan immigrant thing is very interesting because nobody has any sympathy for people who are in the country legally who are hardened criminals who've committed
No. And I want to have this conversation on a much bigger level.
Right. Nobody has any sympathy even for Tren de Aragua gang members. Here's the thing.
No, of course not.
Gang members who were deported, there was no proof that we've seen that went before a judge that said they were gang members, right?
Right.
And so using this Alien Act, which has been used 3 times in American history, the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II.
Some time ago.
Yeah. And now, look, Tren de Aragua was a serious threat. It's not World War I, World War II, or the War of 1812.
It is none of those things. I'm glad you pointed that out.
And the lawyers so I'm not opposed to deporting people or violent criminals or members of Tren de Aragua, but take it through the proper protocols. Don't pull out some law from 1798 to try to justify it. And I just want to read in court today. This is what the lawyers arguing my position, which is that Trump should not be using the Alien Act. This is what they said. The implication of the government's position are staggering. If the president can designate any group as enemy aliens under the act, and that designation is unreviewable, then there is no limit on who can be sent to a Salvadorian prison or any limit on how long they will remain there. At present, the Salvadorian president is saying these men will be there at least a year and that imprisonment is, quote, renewable. The key part there, if it's unreviewable, there is no limit. And that's exactly right. If the president has the authority to do this and it's unchecked and it can't be reviewed, that's crazy town. And so I'm glad. I think he will lose this. But ultimately, getting back to your point, I want to mention what you said about why have they not blatantly defied the court orders? They've skirted it. There was that dispute about the planes in the air, but they haven't really come out and specifically said, hell no, we are not following this order. I think there's several reasons for that. But the biggest one is I think in a weird way, having a conservative Supreme Court is actually checking Trump. And what I mean by that is they want these cases at the Supreme Court as quickly as possible because that's where they think they have the advantage. And they do. It's 6-3, pretty conservative court that has a pretty expansive view of executive power. I think they're going to find out that the court's view of executive power isn't quite as expansive as theirs is. But like all of these things, or most of these cases, are going to end up at the Supreme Court. And I think they believe they have a very good chance of winning these cases at the Supreme Court. And so that's why I think they're willing to take the short-term hit, not trigger the constitutional crisis, knowing that months and in some cases years from now, the Supreme Court is going to decide these cases. Although some of these are on the fast track. So I think we could see decisions on some of these things in months. But so far, again, the courts are holding, and by and large, the Trump administration is respecting those rulings, even though the rhetoric of impeaching and is, off the chart. So I think that is an important distinction to make.
Yeah. I want to come back to immigration and the Venezuelans and the whole thing. So when I say I want to have this conversation on a higher level, what I mean is on one hand, can we agree that illegal immigration, it has been a crisis over the last 4 years? I think that is fair. I think that's a fair way to say
absolutely fair.
And I think that's the way that Trump, and if you're on that side, they're framing it that way, right? So in a crisis, he's saying, I have broad powers to address this issue. And I don't think he's wrong for that, by the way, because we agree. The issue is the other side, which, I consider my side and what I get frustrated by, they're going to point out, and this is not completely unfair, that there's a lot of people that are going to get caught in the fringes. Like the German man who is here on a green card, who was strip searched at the airport because he had a marijuana conviction that was overturned from 2015, and now he's being deported. There was a woman from Laos. I don't know, something happened there, but she should have been here legally. My point is, when you're, and you and I have talked about this on this program before, this is something that is gigantic. And when you're dealing with something that is gigantic, mistakes are going to be made. There, it's terrible to say, but there are going to be people who get deported who shouldn't be deported if you're handling what we agree is a crisis in this way. And that brings it back to my fundamental issue with the entire thing, is that, yes, we agree this is a crisis, but there is an organized way to do this where we do end up not deporting people who shouldn't be deported. And you know how that happens with due process. And you hit that at the very beginning of this. If you have no due process, which, whether you're a citizen, whether you're here on a green card, hell, whether you're an illegal immigrant, when you're in this country, the one thing you should be guaranteed is due process. And I don't think I'm crazy for saying this. To your point, this is not 1812. This is not World War I. This is not World War II. Even though we agree that we have a very large problem and a very large issue, it goes back to what you and I have agreed upon from the beginning and what you said about all these court cases. It's not necessarily that you're wrong about the thing that you're trying to accomplish. It's the way that you're going about it.
Right. And that's the thing. That's the ironic thing is, in most of these areas we're talking about, specifically in immigration enforcement and also when it comes to firing employees, the president does have great discretion.
Of course. As he should.
Or he should. The problem with Trump and the people who believe, well, maybe never she. The people who believe what he believes and are even more hardcore about it, they think that even that power is not enough, that it should be essentially unchecked. And that is the argument. Like, for instance, this Columbia University college student.
I looked into that.
who's being held in Louisiana. Marco Rubio wants to remove him.
Yeah.
Should that person be removed? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because they have not had a hearing. But
Correct.
they are going to have a hearing. And in that hearing, the government will be able to present evidence. And look, they're not a U.S. citizen, so they don't get a jury trial. They don't get beyond a reasonable doubt, but
No.
they do have a process. And they have to show, the government should, and I believe will have to show, that it was more than just this individual's political speech against Israel, that it was actually fundamentally supporting a terrorist organization, Hamas. And if they can show that, then great. I'll be the first one to say, get this person the hell out. But if they can't show it, then I will say the person needs to stay and we need to go through the process. So that's the point of all this stuff is many of these powers the president has, but they don't have them to the extreme end that Trump and his people believe they do. And so I'm hoping that John Roberts, who spoke up today, and Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh, kind of the three in the middle of our court, which is kind of a 3-3-3.
The Martin
court.
Short, Chevy Chase, and Steve Martin.
And Steve Martin, right? The three amigos. I hope two of them can rein in some of this power when the cases ultimately make it to the Supreme Court and say to Trump, no, the executive does have power, but not unchecked power.
Not unchecked.
Another example, and this is going to end up as the Supreme Court, is Trump is firing or forcing to resign people on independent boards and commissions, like the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Election Commission, the Federal Communications Commission. These were set up to be quasi-independent agencies by Congress in order to insulate them from politics. Now, I think that's very reasonable, that people who oversee our elections, oversee things like the Federal Trade Commission, that they should have some insulation from the political process, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Reasonable. The Trump position is no, that Article 2 of the Constitution allows the president to fire anybody for anything at any time, and that so these things are by their nature unconstitutional. I don't think they are. And ultimately, that's going to end up with the Supreme Court as well.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with a lot of what Trump is doing, is he and his people are taking a view of unchecked executive authority. And that's not the way it works. The other thing they could do is they could try to go to Congress to change some of these things. They have the ability to do that. They have a Republican majority in the House and the Senate. They could go to Congress and try to pass laws.
Yeah, codify these things.
To give the president these kinds of powers that he wants. And they don't do that. Instead, they're trying to just grab them. And so, like I said, so far the courts have been pretty good, and hopefully they stay that way. And that brings us to our second topic, which is how the Democrats are responding, specifically with the government shutdown last week, or the non-government shutdown. Chuck Schumer and 9 other Democrats voted to allow the spending bill to go forward to fund the government through the rest of the fiscal year. If they had not done that, it's almost certain there would have been a government shutdown. Many people on the left are mad as hell at Schumer for not voting to block that bill, not shutting the government down. But you know what? Schumer made a point that in a shutdown, one of the things that maybe closes are the federal courts.
Yep.
And you've seen in the last 48 hours, all these rulings against Trump, they may not have happened if there had been a shutdown. And so I think I understand the arguments on both sides. I really do think this was a close call for the Democrats on what they should have done. But ultimately, I think Schumer and the 9 others that voted with him in a tough spot, I think they made the right decision. I think they picked the lesser, of two evils, in my opinion.
My issue is that the Democratic Party at this juncture seems aimless. And I'm not mad. It's not emotional towards Charles Schumer. He's in a really tough spot. And I agree with him. If the government shuts down, Musk wanted the government to shut down. I don't know where that's from, but I believe that is on record somewhere, because it would have made what he was doing exponentially easier to do with the government shutdown. So I understand what Chuck Schumer did, and I get his reasons why, and I think there's some validity to it. I really do. My problem is you gave up this huge thing and gave the votes, and you got nothing back in return, which tells me there was an absence of a plan. And when you're in leadership, Nothing is more important than having a plan. Like, the way that I view leadership is if you have a plan and it fails, then fine. You tried to execute something and you failed at it. That's okay. But just to go into battle with no plan at all and just seem aimless, that's why I'm angry at Chuck Schumer. Because you gave this thing up and you got nothing back in return. This idea that somehow the government didn't shut down, like, why didn't you just say, like, hey, guys, I'll agree to the CR that we had in the past. Let's just do a continuing resolution, kick this can down the road. That would have been a win in this particular case.
Well, that's what they tried to do at the end. The problem was they didn't stake that position out as their all weeks earlier.
Because why? They had no plan.
Right, they had no plan. And I think that's really the critique of Schumer that I think is the most damning. To me, given where he was at the end in the closing days, I think he probably made the right call.
Yeah, he ended up in the right place. That's what you said earlier.
But to me, he ended up in the right place because of the difficult position he was in.
Yeah.
But the problem was he put himself in that position, and I think there was a way where they could have come out earlier and said, we will not vote for anything unless it's a clean, what we call a clean resolution.
Yeah.
Because and the reason that's important is because that's the precedent. The precedent is to fund the government, you either do one of two things. You pass a clean continuing resolution, which just keeps everything the same, or you pass a complete government funding change that is negotiated between Republicans and Democrats. It's always one of those two. And this broke that precedent. And I think what happened was Republicans, many Republicans in the House, dozens of them, have never in their careers voted for any kind of continuing resolution or anything close to like this. And I think Democrats figured they're not going to be able to pass it because enough of these Republicans are not going to do this. They're not going to do something they've never done before. And then once it fails, then the Republicans will come to us to negotiate. That's really what they thought. The problem is we're in a different world now. And to Trump's credit and Mike Johnson's credit, they have now turned these Republicans who would never have voted for something like this when Democrats were in charge. They have now gotten them in line. So this should be the wake-up call that Democrats need. That you have to give Mike Johnson and Trump credit that they were able to get this done. And when they got it done, Democrats, I think, were really surprised and in a tough spot because they're like, oh, shit, they really did this. And now we've got a week to go or less than a week. And the government's going to shut down if we don't let this through.
Did you see the New York Times interview with Chuck Schumer?
I heard some of it. I did not hear the whole thing.
Well, I asked because there is a bit of delusion on his part, which is that Republicans, basically, to summarize this, his position, Charles Schumer, is that when the shit really hits the fan and the F word starts to go crazy, that there's going to be some Republicans who are like, hold on, wait a minute. We're going to turn this around. And in that New York Times interview, the interviewer is basically saying, like, hey, look, there are a lot of governments around the world that I have experience in and I've covered in my journalistic career that they had the same idea, which was when the F word goes too far, the opposition is looking at that side and saying, well, hey, it'll go too far and they'll turn it around. And that's never happened. Do you fear that as the Democratic leader of the Senate? And the reason I use the word delusional is he said no. Like, he's denying things that are, I mean, they've happened all around the world. So as a Democrat, that gives me a little bit of pause for the leadership of Charles Schumer. And look, Chuck Schumer's done a lot of amazing things. He's been around for 475 years, I think, since he came here on the Mayflower. That's how long he's been in office. But maybe, I don't know, just maybe, it's time to start turning these things over to a different leadership because their approval ratings are in the toilet. And I think it's for good reason. And I think it is because of what we're talking about here, because they're aimless. They have no plan. Who's running this? It's a big problem for Chuck Schumer. I think I've heard a lot of folks in the know say that he'll keep his position and everything will be fine. I don't know about that, man. I think he's in big trouble, personally.
I think he'll survive this. How he handled it is almost a separate question of if he should still be the leader at 74 years old in the modern era. But I think he'll survive this for now. Hakeem Jeffries, the House leaders, come out and backed him. Pelosi came out and backed him, even though Pelosi said she would have not.
I believe Pelosi
said something you said earlier. I don't like to. She said I don't give away something for nothing, which is essentially what the Democrats did. But here's the thing: this, to me, at the end of the day, was not the battle, because even though I don't like the precedent of passing something that isn't either a clean CR or a negotiated compromise, this was pretty close to a clean CR. I think on net it cut about $10 billion of non-defense spending out of about $850 billion. So that's not nothing. Right. I mean, it's not nothing. Some programs were zeroed out, but this to me was not the fight, because you have an election, and as they say, elections have consequences.
They do.
And so the party that wins, if they win the presidency, the House, and the Senate, they're going to get something. That's the way our democracy works. And so to me, this was a small loss in a much larger battle. And what you need to do now is understand what you're up against and understand that this is not the Republican Party that wouldn't vote for CRs before.
That's what I was saying.
They're in lockstep. So now the next fight, you need to be ready, because the next time, which is the next fiscal year, which begins in October, Mike Johnson says he wants to put in the DOGE cuts into that, and they want to try to cut hundreds of billions of dollars, potentially Medicaid. We'll see. And so at that point, I believe that this will not happen again. I believe the Democrats will lay down their marker early, and they will say, we will not vote for this unless we get X, Y, Z. And so I think they'll be ready. They need to be, because this fight's going to come up again 6 months from now. But you mentioned their approval. It's a lot of polls have it very low. CNN had one the other day that had the Democratic favorability at 29%. That's the lowest it's ever been in a CNN survey. Now, Republicans' approval was only like 37. So it's not like Republicans.
No one approves of anything.
Right. So let's be clear about that. I am not as pessimistic on the Democrats as a lot of people are. And the reason is not because I think the Democrats have been great. I mean, I said I thought their behavior at the State of the Union was just despicable. Not standing and cheering for the 13-year-old boy with cancer.
Yeah, that was bad.
Silly little signs they had. Some of the cringe videos they're doing, like, have you seen the Choose Your Fighter video? Like, stop. Just please stop. But that said, I am old enough to remember the year of our Lord, 2009. And the Republican Party at that point had an approval rating very similar to what Democrats do now. We had just had a Republican president, George W. Bush, who left office with an approval rating in the 30s.
Well, that was related to the housing market. I don't want to do the whole history, but come on, man.
No, I'm saying, he was blamed for that, rightly or wrongly, and his party was blamed for that. And his approval rating was in the toilet, and there's some truth to what you're saying. But the point is, the approval rating was terrible. Nobody wanted to be a Republican. Barack Obama won a landslide victory in modern.
I remember those days. They were glorious.
The biggest we've seen. They had a huge majority in the House. For a brief time, they had 60 votes in the Senate, which is absurd to even think about. That no one's gotten close to that since. And what happened? Within 2 years, Republicans had taken back the House. So
it's why I'm critical of Barack Obama, just really quickly. When that happened, he should have done what Trump's doing now. Because if Trump was presented with a scenario that Obama had, oh my God, dude.
But that speaks to a larger issue about Democrats. What you just said is, obviously they're going to benefit if the Trump administration continues to be as controversial, as crazy, as haphazard. If these tariffs go into effect and the markets crash, maybe we have a recession. The Democrats will rise by default,
of course,
because in our country they are the only
how
opposition.
It works. Yeah.
So part of this will take care of itself for them. They got to pick the right battles, be smart, don't do stupid shit. But there is another element to this, which is really going to be important, maybe not so much in 26, but in 28 is, okay, let's say Trump is unpopular and he fucks a lot of things up. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Other than reverse some Trump policies? Like, let's say the Democrats had won. Let's say they had won the trifecta instead of the Republicans. What would be the big bill they would try to pass? What's their agenda? What do the Democrats want to do legislatively? We know what Trump wants to do. We see it. We see it all the time.
What did I say? Aimless. This is my point.
That is what they need. They need to figure out, okay, and some of that will be taken care of by a vigorous open primary process, because the candidate, whoever wins that primary, will become the de facto leader of the party, and they will set the agenda. But they better come with their best ideas. And we could talk about this in the future. There's a lot of ideas percolating. There's a lot of smart people that are saying a lot of interesting things. But that, to me, is going to be what the Democrats really need to focus on. The rest will probably take care of itself, just like it did for Republicans in 2009. Like, could you imagine in 2009 if you would have said, hey, I know the Republican Party looks bad now, but they're going to take back the House.
Yeah, it would have been hard to believe.
Then a few years after that, they're going to take back the Senate. Then a few years after that, Donald Trump is going to win the presidency.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I know you don't want this, but this is my honest answer. If you're Barack Obama, you have 60-40, you have everything. Social medicine should have been the first thing done.
He couldn't do it because there were enough conservative Democrats. Remember, they tried a public option, which is kind of like in between Obamacare and socialized medicine. The public option is basically allowing a Medicare type option on the exchange that's run by the government. And they couldn't get that through because there were enough conservative Democrat senators who said, no, I'm not going to vote for that. So they had to settle for Obamacare. But I understand what you're saying.
But my larger point is that, like, you're talking about things to run on, things to do. These are popular things in the zeitgeist. They're killing CEOs of insurance companies, and people are like, yeah, kill that guy. Fuck him. Like, there's enough public sentiment behind that type of thing where make that an agenda item. Why are your prescriptions so much? Why, if you have one medical issue in your lifetime, are you all of a sudden bankrupt? Like, these are easy things that you can run on that exist, that the Republicans have no solution for, and on the opposite side, there are winning arguments for you as we move forward.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from Trump and Trumpism and MAGA. But I think maybe the biggest overarching lesson is the political window of what is possible on all sides has shifted. The game has changed so much in such a short period of time that ideas, policies that maybe were seen as too extreme before, if they're packaged the right way and they're well thought out, I think are in play now in a way they weren't. And so Democrats need to take that lesson of Trump and say, hey, this guy was able to, love him or hate him, change what is possible in the political realm. He did that through his brazenness and his force of will and whatever he's on, whatever.
Well, this is what you and I have always agreed on, and you've never liked the way I framed this. Like, when we look back at Trump historically, I'm telling you, man, he is going to be one of the great politicians of our time. He will, like, whether you agree or not, put that to the side. What he's able, the disruption that he's able to cause. And some have called it chaos. I know we on this show have called it chaos. But my point is like, will the Democrats learn from that? Will they take advantage of that? And that's why I go back to Schumer and me saying this idea that when things get too F-word, the other side is going to turn. It's crazy. That's not going to happen. Like, it's just not, man.
You're allowed to curse. It's okay.
No. I'm not going to say fascism 75 times like they did on Pod Save America.
Oh, I thought you were saying when things get too fucked. Okay, I didn't know. No. The other F word.
Yeah,
okay.
No, the other F word, the bad F word.
Okay.
Like I said, I just don't want to say fascism 75 times during this because I don't like when those comparisons are made because of the guardrails we have in place. And you and I have talked about this on the show before. I understand where the idea comes from, but it's not. It's a false equivalency. It really is.
and again, this is another mistake Democrats make is getting too far out over your skis. That's why
Yeah.
it's better. It's better to that I think ultimately I settled on it was better. They didn't do the shutdown. It's better that they lay back on some of this stuff. Let the game come to you because
Yeah, we agree on this, by the way.
and I think here's the important thing with that is it's very hard with Trump, but you
Oh
have
my
to make
God, it isn't.
you have to make a distinction between what he thinks probably we're not in his mind, but what he
Yeah.
probably thinks, what he would like to do, what he says, what he tweets. And you have to make a distinction between that and what actually is happening. Right. And that's hard to do sometimes because it all happens together. And so
I try and do that very much. I read the comments on our YouTube channel, and sometimes I get upset because I've made myself known as a Democrat. I've made myself as someone who is known to not be a huge fan of Trump and everything he's trying to do. But the reason I say it's unfair, there are tons of times I agree with him. And during this very thing where we've been talking for 35 minutes, I agree. Illegal immigration is a crisis. It needs to be dealt with. I give him a lot of slack for the way he deals with it in a lot of ways. It's the extreme nature that is taken to that I have a real problem with. But in the context of this conversation, I give him tremendous credit for.
Yeah.
And why I think he really in the annals of history, Eric, will be remembered. And this is insane to say. I'm sorry. He's an incredible politician, man.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying he could be a failed president.
Yeah.
But a great politician. I think he probably will be a failed. I think he's headed toward being a failed.
I do too.
It wasn't his first term. But you're right. No, to his credit, there is no one in our lifetime and way before our lifetime that has ever changed one of our two major political parties as fundamentally as Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party.
Yeah.
He has bent that party to his will.
It's crazy.
Like there were other people who changed their party. Like Bill Clinton was a new Democrat. The Democrats were different under him than they had been before. Like there are people who have had an effect on their party in moving it one way or the other, but nobody has fundamentally rewritten what the party is in a very, very long time.
And I just want to be clear. I give him credit for that. I really do.
That's a tremendous talent and skill to
be
able
amazing.
To do that. Yeah. He had a lot of help from a lot of things, some of those forces that aren't great. We can talk about another time. But right. He deserves credit for that. Even though I think
nationalism,
it's bad. I think it's been bad for the Republican Party and bad for our country, but he deserves credit for doing it. All right, Brian, let's talk about the world of sports. Real quick, I have not been following college basketball. It's so sad because when we were younger, I used to love the first week of the tournament.
Hold on, and stop. You and I used to skip school together.
We did.
We skipped school to watch the NCAA tournament. Some of the greatest memories in my life.
There was a period of my life where that Thursday, the first day of the tournament, was maybe my favorite day of the year. I mean, it rivaled Christmas in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me for a long time. The first day of the tournament. But now that I'm old and I'm kind of disconnected from some of that stuff, I'll still watch here or there. But I don't know. It's one of those things that I've lost as I've gotten older.
Me as well. Look, have you filled out a bracket?
No, I haven't filled out a bracket in years.
I fill out a bracket every year, and basically I just do it by teams. I do my picks based on uniforms, which is probably not the way if you're a betting man to do this. But I do want to step back to, like, I can't wait until Sebastian is 15, 16, 17 years old and he wants to take off for the NCAA tournament because I'm going to let that happen. Because it's still is an amazing thing. Even though that I don't follow it like I used to, it is an amazing time, like, in our culture. The NCAA tournament. It's really cool. I love the arguing over their brackets, the whole thing. I think college basketball has slid probably in our lifetimes because of players entering early to the NBA and doing all that kind of thing. But with NIL, man, college basketball has a real chance to not. It's never going to be Patrick Ewing versus Michael Jordan. That's never going to happen again. It's just not. It can't. But I think you are going to have outstanding players that stay in college longer.
Yeah.
because of NIL. And it's going to make the NCAA much, much more interesting. Even if folks like you and me don't follow it like we used to, I think it has a chance to recover some of that prestige in the sports economy that it once had.
Yeah, I think that's probably true because of the NIL dollars are so big and
Yeah.
will be so big. So one other topic. When we did this last week, NFL free agency had just started. We were talking about whether the Steelers should sign Aaron
Here we
Rodgers
go.
or Russell
Strap
Wilson.
in.
And we still, a week later, don't know. We're waiting on Aaron Rodgers. Like, I just think it would be a terrible mistake for the Steelers to sign Aaron Rodgers. Apparently, he wants around 30 or 35 million a year.
Fine.
I talked about this last week. Well, I think Russell Wilson actually might be better. Russell Wilson's certainly younger. And Russell Wilson doesn't have, there's a headache element with Aaron Rodgers. Let's call it out. It's not because he's anti-vax and he's a little weird, although that's something.
I said, I don't care.
But like last year with the Jets, when he didn't show up to minicamp, and now this, taking all this time, Cam Hayward, Steelers defensive captain for many years, said on the Not Just Football podcast, either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. It's that simple. That's the pitch. If you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. Pittsburgh Steelers. If you want to be a part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin off my back. I just
this is why I love Cam Hayward, but also what a Neanderthal statement.
I just
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean that in any other way than like it's so oversimplified. Aaron Rodgers is as old as Chuck Schumer, and he has to decide whether or not he wants to put his body through another year of this. I don't. Come on, stop. How can you be upset with Aaron Rodgers? I think he should take his time in making this decision.
This indecisiveness. It's another.
Oh my God.
If he still was an elite level player, I wouldn't care. But he's been weird.
No, that's
in the
fair.
locker. He's been weird in the locker room for years. He's not an elite level player or anywhere close to it. He's
I've
41.
watched
His numbers the last 2 years not good. I mean, do you think he is significantly better than Russell Wilson?
No. And I want to be clear. I would rather have Russell Wilson.
Me too.
Second year in the system, familiar with the offense, familiar with the players.
5 years younger.
Yeah, well, it's
will come cheaper.
I said that I didn't want Aaron Rodgers, not based on anything else than his play on the field. I think Aaron Rodgers can be a good quarterback for someone. Would I prefer he be the quarterback of my team that I root for at his age, given everything I just said? New offense, new system, new players. Like, I don't know why people just think it's a given that you're going to plug people in and it's going to work. Has that ever worked in sports? The Miami Heat tried it with LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade, and they lost the championship in their first year because, of course, they did. Because it takes time to build a team and a program and a system. I have always been a big advocate of this, and you know this. Dance with the devil that you know. You have Russell Wilson in the building. He knows the system. He knows what's going on. There are a lot of things to actually really like about Russell Wilson. If you're just reading Twitter or you think he's a cornball or whatever, fine. I honestly don't care about that. I'm only interested in, can he hit DK Metcalf on a streak route down the field? The answer to that is yes. Yes, he can do that. Mm-hmm. So I would prefer to have Russell Wilson back. Will I get my way? I have no idea. And all of that said, I respect Aaron Rodgers in his career, but he's so old.
He's so old. And we have Mason Rudolph now, so we'll be fine, right?
Mason Rudolph, who I wanted to play for the Browns, but the Steelers signed him.
I'm just disappointed that in this offseason for the Steelers because, like, Metcalf obviously was huge and a big
No, I was going to say, that's a great signing.
I thought this was going to be the beginning of something. And they've signed a bunch of guys. Most of them are backups, fill-ins. Darius Slay is still, I guess, pretty good, but he's 34 years old, and it's a one-year deal, so it's worth it. But no big splash. We'll see. You got the draft coming up.
No big splash. Right. DK Metcalf is a big splash, dude.
Okay, and after plus, Metcalf.
Okay, but I want to come back because the NFL draft matters more for drafts than in any other sport. In baseball, it's almost irrelevant. In basketball, the top 10 matters a lot. But after the top 10, you're developing. In the NFL, when you draft people, these are people that are coming in and they are difference makers on day one, pretty much rounds 1 through 4. And you see difference makers in later rounds as well. So for the Steelers, we may have to make a final decision on their offseason after the draft.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. All right, Brian, let's turn to the world of entertainment. I've caught up with Daredevil now. I've watched the first 3 episodes. I just want to say I did not watch the Netflix series, so I knew almost nothing about Daredevil or the character, which kind of threw off the beginning for me because I didn't really know any of these people were. But I have to say, I like it so far. It's not.
Oh, this is good to hear.
Yeah, I'm back on the you know me, I did a Marvel boycott. I don't love it. I think sometimes the writing is a little bit clunky. I think some of the plotting is a little bit weird. Like the fact they had a trial. He was the white ninja. Spoiler alert: the guy who was the white. What was he? The white ninja, the white cat,
the white tiger.
White tiger. He he does his crime and then he's like on trial a week later. But
that's how trials work, Eric.
Right. You get arrested and then right away you go right to the
immediately.
Especially for murder. Right?
Yeah, for murder immediately.
But I have to say the performances are good, particularly by the leads. I love the dark tone of the show. And look, you know me, I want realistic violence. And to me, this show has the perfect amount of violence. It is violent, but to me, it's not gratuitous.
Right.
It is necessary for the plot.
Well, they're showing him being born again because he doesn't want to be a vigilante.
He doesn't want to be.
He gets put in positions where he has to.
And the first fight scene that opens the show, that is a really cool set.
Well done.
I mean, really well done in the bar and then up on the roof. So it grabs you right away, throws you in the world. The stakes are clear. The characters are good. I love the dark atmosphere. So I'm in so far on Daredevil. I'm in for the first time in a way I have not been in on anything Marvel in years.
I can't tell you how happy the last 30 seconds makes me. I don't know why. I can't explain it. But the fact that you watched a Marvel show and you weren't like, this is crap. Right. Like, it's not just because it's you. It's because Marvel, DC, the entire comic book universe, like the Penguin, it needs something. Because it's such an important part of entertainment. It is. Because unlike a lot of niche genres, this kind of brings in the entire tent, right? Where you get people from all sides and all perspectives. It doesn't matter. I know we spent the first 45 minutes of the show talking about politics. It is something that brings us all together. So in that way, I'm happy that you watched Daredevil. You recognize the performances. Isn't the acting wonderful? Vincent D'Onofrio, come on. As Kingpin, he does such a great job.
He's great. And the thing I like about his character is I love how they are giving equal billing essentially to the main villain as they are to the hero. And not just with screen time, but also with the exploration of who he is as a person.
Right.
And
with his wife and therapy.
Yeah, that is really well done. And I think this is what Marvel needed. They needed to shake it up. This show is clearly so much different than, Agatha All Along or something, or She-Hulk. Like it is just, and they needed something like that. They needed a more gritty, more violent, more like realistic show that's set in a time and place that we can relate to. Like that is New York, right? And it's really well done all around. Now, does this fit into the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe? Like, will Daredevil now be in the movies, or?
I think Daredevil is going to play a role moving forward, and we don't have enough time. We don't. I'm sorry. We could have a phone call where I explain everything to you, but for the purposes of this podcast, there's not enough time. I'm sorry.
Well, just answer that question though.
He'll fit in.
Is this part of the larger Marvel?
It's not the 616 universe, but it will, which is the main timeline.
Oh, okay.
But you notice how they even mentioned Spider-Man.
Yeah.
In this multiple times. There's a reason why. But it's probably going to end up being Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
Oh,
not
really? So
Tom Holland. So it'll be a separate universe. This is why I'm saying No one cares.
Right.
Like
So
it's
that
yeah, right.
but I'm glad. See, they should use that. That is what the multiverse gives them.
Yeah.
It gives them a chance to make this story and make it in a way that doesn't have to worry about fitting
Yeah.
in with Thor or Hulk. And
Which is why
that
it's
is
great.
right. It makes it feel more realistic. All right, Brian. We also had episode 5 of White Lotus season 3. This was my favorite episode of the
Okay.
season for many reasons. I
Please
thought the
go. Go,
season
go, go. I want
started
to hear why.
I thought the season started kind of slow, and I
No.
didn't really love the first couple episodes because I think I missed some of the humor of the show that I thought they had more of in the first 2 seasons than they did in this one. Some of the lighter moments. And I think I kind of missed that, even though the show by and large was still the same level of quality in terms of the acting and the writing, the production value. But now I've really come to like it. I just the slow burn of Mike White, the way he peels back the layers of these characters and puts them in different situations. And the Parker Posey character continues to bring the comedy.
Phenomenal.
When she brings up the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton,
Yeah.
when her daughter's talking about the monk wrote a book, and she's like, Bill Clinton wrote a book. Hillary
Right.
Clinton wrote 5 books.
Right.
Could be a sex cult. Like this is just
Yeah.
this
Nexium.
I
It'll
love
be branded.
right. I love the 3 female characters to me, the 3 friends. That is so interesting to me, even though it's not tied in, obviously, or we don't think to the murder and violence plot of the bigger plot of the story. I love how those 3 and their dynamic with each other, and you could just see. I forget her name, the one who's the actress. You could just see this season, that facade of confidence with her and her wanting and her being this actress, this person who's in a world of youth and beauty, and then realizing as the season goes on, wait a minute, I'm getting older. She's at
Yeah.
that pool with all those older people, and she can't stand it. She has to leave right away. She's out searching. She's
Right.
looking for something, and we know what she's looking for. She's looking for her youth. She's looking to grab onto it, and then eventually she finds at the
She
end of the
finds her
episode,
youth.
she finds her youth and the young guy from the White Lotus. Her husband doesn't respond to her. She's feeling rejected from him when she calls him and can't get a hold of him. So I think that arc with those 3 characters to me is why White Lotus is so fucking good because of the detail in the characters. But saying all that, what made the episode was the iconic Sam Rockwell guest appearance.
Oh
and
God, I'm so happy. I told Trisha, I was like, dude, Sam Rockwell, when he's telling that story about being an Asian woman, I was captivated like nothing else. I paused it when he was done, and I just said, this is why I watched this show.
It was so amazing.
Oh my God. Thank God for
scene.
Sam Rockwell, man.
I watched that scene 3 times.
Did you?
And because there are clips of it on X as I'm scrolling through it. I've watched his part back 3 times. It was amazing. It was hilarious. Let's just start there. It was just epically funny. When he's talking, he's like, yeah, I brought home a lady boy, and this time I let her rail me.
I have never had a conversation with another human being like that in my life that I recall. But there's a part of me when I heard it, I was like, I want that in my life.
Wait, you want the lady boy?
No, right. I knew you would go there. But what I mean is like that unabashed, unashamed.
Yes.
I'm meeting this person, and you know what, man? I've been through some shit, so fuck it. I'm just going to weigh out what I went through.
Yes.
To this person. It was shocking.
It was.
To me, it was shocking. Like I said, I paused it because I couldn't even put it together. But the fact that it was Sam Rockwell is what brings it home. Because he is a national treasure.
He sold the shit out of it. And I think, okay, it was hilarious and just one of the funniest things I've seen on the season so far. And I laughed out
funny
loud.
in an uncomfortable way.
Right. Funny in an uncomfortable way. But what made it great wasn't that it was funny. What made it great is actually after the shock of and the humor of what he was saying, because he sold it so well, it actually ended up being deep.
Yes.
And it tied into this season's premise, which is clearly these people are searching for something. They're searching for, and this is most apparent, not just with his character, but with the girl, the daughter who wants to go and
be a
study.
monk.
They're searching for what they are. What are they when it's all stripped away? I think the actress is obviously going through that as well. Like, what are they in this world? Now, he obviously took it to a pretty extreme example.
Right, well,
am I a small Asian girl inside? I'm not saying everyone needs to go that far to try to find themselves. But I thought it ended up being profound, and I never would have thought that when he started the monologue. And also credit to the guy who plays Walter Goggins, because even though he hardly spoke in that scene,
Walter Goggins plays Walter Goggins.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Walter Goggins is the actor. You're right.
Yeah.
He sold the shit out of that with his reactions.
No, he's perfect. Perfect.
Priceless.
Right. He's like, aha. It was almost like Succession, like, aha.
The look of just utter shock on his face, and he's like nodding his head. He's like, but you don't really mean that, right?
Right.
And he's like, no, I mean it. Oh my God. It was
tough.
It
was tough to get through. Like I said, I paused it and I had to like settle in it and live in it. And I mean, Sam Rockwell, man, God bless that guy, Walter Goggins. I'm glad you gave him credit because he was perfect there. That's the scene of the season by far.
Absolutely. Oh, I totally agree. There's no doubt about it. So let me ask you this, because you were a skeptic and you had never seen the show before the few weeks ago, and you started from season 1. Are you now all in? Like, do you see why I like the show so much?
I do, but I like the show like I like Better Call Saul. Because like Better Call Saul was not fast paced. I mean, obviously it picked up at the end when it had to, but I do appreciate the type of storytelling that is willing to base it more in reality. We're not trying to tie a bow on anything. We're trying to have what are air quote real conversations with these real people and how they would actually react in these situations, which you and I just discussed. I can appreciate the show from that perspective. I think I may go back and watch season 1 and 2 with a new perspective, which will probably, I enjoyed season 2, to be clear. I did, because of you just have to get yourself in such an emotional headspace to watch that show. And I told you last week, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I like candy. I like being spoon-fed things. Like, I'm lazy. Well, maybe I just became lazy in that way because I was so used to it. Now that something is thought-provoking, it's layered, and you have to really consider it and like sit with it for a while. I remember that feeling, and I do like it. So that's where I'm at.
And credit to Mike White, man, for making something and creating something that makes us have to do that in this age of so much kind of disposable entertainment where everything is part of a part of a larger property, or it's a sequel or a prequel or a spinoff. So I give him a ton of credit for that. Oh, and then at the end, the two brothers kissing.
Oh no, I didn't even want to talk about it.
I'm an only child.
Disturbed.
I'm an only child, so I'm not aware of that. You have a brother. Is that something that happens, or what? What is your read on the sibling dynamic there?
How do I feel about incest? Is what you're asking me. I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan. You are, just to be clear, you have taken a firm.
I have a firm position. I'm anti-incest, regardless of my siblings in real life. No, I think the design there is just to be uncomfortable. And I think it does an excellent job in that. Obviously, the younger brother idolizes the older brother, and it's in a sexual nature. And I think that's an interesting thing to explore. And I give Mike White credit for doing that. Is it something that I want to view or that I enjoy? I would choose not to.
My read of it, and we'll find out, because again, with Mike White and with White Lotus, you don't really know for sure until the season's over, and then still sometimes you don't really
You don't know
for sure.
Open ended.
My gut is that it's not so much an incest thing; it's more of the younger brother is gay and doesn't know it, or is bisexual and doesn't.
I
know
could
it.
see that,
and so I think he has a sexual fascination with men that he's uncomfortable ever exploring because of his
outwardly.
conservative
North Carolina, right?
Conservative parents, North Carolina, from the South. And so maybe he's not even fully aware of it. And so I think the brother brings up, because the brother's so open in talking about sex, and I think the brother brings that out of him in a way. So it's not really so much about the brother, it's about his way of expressing a suppressed sexual desire in the only way that he thinks that it's safe to do it. That's my read. I could be totally wrong.
I like that. I hadn't considered it until you and I were talking about it tonight, but I could, the way you laid that out, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, that would fit too with Mike White and what he does. All right, so I'm glad you're on the White Lotus train. I'm so excited for these last 3 episodes. Unfortunately, I think we will never find a moment that will live up to that Sam Rockwell monologue.
No, never. Nothing.
Nothing.
I can't imagine it.
That was just gold, man. I'm so glad you appreciated that as much as only
I really did.
A fellow heathen like yourself would appreciate that as much as I did. So I'm very happy about that. Do you have any final thoughts, Brian, before we end the show today?
We don't have enough time to get into the death of capitalism, but I hope we do at some point.
Oh,
because
yeah, you think we're in we're in late stage capitalism, you're saying?
I think we are Tony Soprano in episode 1 of The Sopranos, where it's great, but we're coming in on the end of something. Do you remember how he opens that up?
Yeah.
I feel like that is where we're at with capitalism. And I don't want to be totally... I think it is the best system, but I think at this point, and again... at the end of the show, for a final thought, there's not near enough time to delve into this. I just think we are at the end of something great, man. I really do.
Say, you have said this show that you believe in the rule of law, due process, you are pro-capitalism, and you are anti-incest. So we learned a lot about you in this show, and I think everyone...
Yeah, those are firm positions, by the way.
Yes. You don't let anyone ever say that you do not stake out firm positions on important issues.
I hope at some point during our little program together, we can get into it, because I do fear for the future of my children.
I like that. It's a nice meaty topic. Maybe next week. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. Thanks so much for being with us. We hope you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.